Hello, everyone. Thank you for following me to Monday. Sorry for the confusion on Facebook. There was it said it's on Monday, but it said it starts in 1 hour today, so that was a little confusing. I'm sorry. But here we are on Monday. I just want to pop this up quickly. That's where you can reach today's soundtrack. scientificsounds.com/reaching. This is where you can go to ask a question or make comments about anything we've covered here. scientificsounds.com/ask-a-question. And this is where you can go to see all the live streams that we've done up to now. And I know we have a lot of new people every single week now. So for those of you who are new, there's quite a number of these broadcasts. Each one builds on information from the one before, so it's a good idea to go back and start watching them, even though there's a lot. There's a lot of information there. It's exciting. There's all these different soundtracks you can listen to. I'm looking back at this and going, oh my God, I've made, 60 some odd soundtracks and given them away for free. The soundtrack will last for 1 week. There's also a discount on one of the soundtracks I have on my website, if you want to buy that. We also use headphones. We're doing a sort of high-tech mind link here and training people's brainwaves all together at the same time to make change in the quantum field. Nothing small here, right? Well, the latest thing, here we are at Science News. I have all these magazines and I have all these news feeds, and there's always something new that's coming through. This particular one, real living fossils. So check out what it says here. It says, after 100 million years, trapped in ocean sediment, microbes wake up and multiply. 100 million years in suspended animation. They had a boat, a ship, parked over an area of the ocean which is a special zone, unique in the world, where the ocean currents create a zone where there's no activity, where the ocean is still and very little sediment drops. It's very difficult for life to exist. And so that's where they were seeking to drop this, miles long thing down there to drill into the sediment to see sort of what's down there. There's 1/100th the amount of life in the sediment, and yet the bacteria that they saw in the sediment, when they brought it back up and they gave it some, food and environment where it could live, they all woke up. 100 million year old bacteria. Good God. I always thought that would be a great sci-fi story, where climate change is melting the permafrost in, Antarctica and exposing ancient bones and dinosaurs and all the rest with their bacteria and their viruses and their diseases and, all that stuff. But I figured now's not the good time in the middle of a pandemic, which is fluctuating around. I mean, it goes down to the bottom, and California relaxes its mask mandates, and all the stores open back up, and all of a sudden you don't have to wear a mask anymore anywhere. And but then the Delta variant starts to arise, and they're thinking of putting masks back in place. So here we go on our little roller coaster ride. Although this was, easily predictable. I kind of talked about this in one of the past live streams where we'll relax everything. There will be another surge, but not as bad, and we'll put everything back in place. It will go down. We'll relax everything. It'll come up a little bit. It'll be a fluctuation. All things in nature do that. Where something responds, under response, over response, under response, and oscillates out until it stabilizes. This is classic physics, actually. And the physical body does that. In my biotuning technique with the heart rate variability and the sound waves, I base that on a first-year clinic test called the Raglan Test. And the Raglan Test, you use a blood pressure cuff. It's a test for adrenal insufficiency. Adrenals are the first line of defense in stress handling, and the first thing to respond in a stress response is heart respiration, and then the autonomic nervous system kicks the adrenals raise the blood pressure. There's a mini version of that that's normal, that we all experience all the time that we don't know about. And that's what this Raglan test is testing for. And how that works is when I'm upright, like I am right now, gravity is pulling the blood out of my head to the center of the earth. And you can't live without blood in your head, so you die. So there's barometric receptors in the carotid arteries that are there specifically to monitor the pressure, the blood pressure in my brain. And when I'm upright, that pressure is dropping, and these barometric receptors signal the autonomic nervous system, and it kicks in a modified alarm response, which kicks the adrenals. The adrenals raise my blood pressure just enough to equalize this gravity stress. So it's called gravity stress, and this is normal function. Normal function is I should be walking around upright with a little bit of elevated blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury, and my sympathetic nervous system should be on a little bit. That's normal function. However, when you lay down, no more gravity stress. Well, it's easy to pump the blood on a horizontal plane, and my heart rate and respiration and blood pressure and pulse should all go down to their lowest, what's called baseline. And that should take 3 minutes. It should take 3 minutes to push in the clutch to reach baseline. And then once you've reached baseline, so the Raglan test is lay you on your back and wait for 5 minutes. Give it a good chance to reach baseline. And take your blood pressure and see what it looks like. What is your blood pressure when it's at its lowest ebb? Your baseline blood pressure. And then stand you up and see what happens. And what should happen is when you stand up, gravity pulls the blood out of your head. Barometric receptors freak out, signal the autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic turns on, kicks the adrenals, raises my blood pressure. But in reality, what happens is the blood pressure goes a little bit too low. I mean, it takes a little bit of time for these guys to respond, to kick these guys, to kick this guy, and the hormone to kick the blood pressure up. So it takes just a little lag there. So it goes a little down, and then the adrenals kick in. It goes up, but it goes up too high. New alarms go off. It shuts that system down, and it goes back down, and it goes too far. So it kicks it back in. It kicks it off, on, off, off. So really what happens is when you stand up, it goes down and up too high and down too low and up too high, but it stabilizes. It does this same thing. It up, down, oscillates and oscillates and stabilizes, and that takes 3 minutes. If your adrenals are weak, by the way, when you stand up, you faint and fall down unconscious. And all kinds of different variations of that. So I might stand up and feel a little woozy for a second. That is a sign of adrenal insufficiency. But the worst case would be I stand up and I just faint. So basically, it all happens so subtly under the hood that I don't even notice. I get up and this little thing happens, but it's minor and I don't even feel it. But the reverse of that is what I use in my technique, the biotuning technique, where I'm doing what I call a reverse Raglan test. Because I'm looking at heart rate variability, and I'm looking at a special version of heart rate variability that I have a patent on. So now on my computer screen, I can see your sympathetic, parasympathetic live on my computer screen. And when I hook you up to these wrist sensors to measure the heart activity with heart rate and variability, which gets different math added to it so I can see on my computer screen the sympathetic, parasympathetic, I'm going to have you lay down on your back, and I'm going to see the sympathetic tone that should be on from gravity stress. And I'm going to watch it collapse down to zero homeostasis, zero stress in the system in 3 minutes. And of course, that's what's controlling blood pressure. So we should see the blood pressure also dropping with the Raglan test when we do a blood pressure cuff. So I'm watching further upstream at the control centers that tells blood pressure what to do. So, and so what I see with patients is after 3 minutes, after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, the sympathetic is just still on. This is abnormal. It's highly abnormal. It means that I'm burning up all my resources. I'm running a fight or flight response all the time, which pulls energy from my gut, elimination system, immune system, higher brain centers, runs my adrenals all the time. My blood pressure's up. My blood sugar is up. Two biggest prescriptions, by the way, from the Modern Medical Association, from pharmaceutical companies. Biggest prescriptions are blood pressure medication and pre-diabetes pills, most of which I've seen are an incorrect diagnosis. It's really runaway adrenals from a fight or flight response going all the time. My innovation is I can make that push in the clutch and go to zero with a precisely tuned sound frequency, and that's biotuning. This is uppermost in my mind because I've just finished teaching a 2-day intensive workshop all day long, Saturday and Sunday, to practitioners learning this technique, this biotuning technique. It's part of a 5-day intensive workshop that goes for 3 weekends. So this was the second 2 days. The previous week, that's why I had this on Mondays last week and this week. And next weekend is the last weekend and is only on Saturday, so it does not affect us. We will be back here on Sunday again next week. But this is I would say probably the busiest time that I think I've ever had in my whole life. I have just so many things going on. I mean, my time is pretty crazy right now. First of all, there was the Heal documentary that became a huge hit that I was in. I played a prominent part in that film. And then it got taken up by Netflix. Now we got 190 million people, and my phone was ringing out the hook. 100 phone calls a day, booked 7 months in advance with patients. Then that slowly cooled off over time, down to, instead of chaos and madness, it was just madness. But then, recently there was being contacted by the History Channel and having a segment on sound for Ancient Aliens episode. I thought that was really funny, so I'm going up to LA to film a segment on Ancient Aliens all about sound, the harmonic code, if you want to look it up, based on conversations I had, a few hours of conversations with the producers as a consultant on what they could cover. What is sound? How do we do sound? What's the whole sound thing all about? So we had lengthy discussions. They built an episode around it, and I was in that episode. Then I've been contacted recently by the Shift Network, one of the big holistic networks online. I did a big interview with them, and now I've been contacted by the Gaia Network, which is even bigger than those guys. They're doing a 10-part series on sound, so I'm consulting with that. I'll be in those series, so I'm flying out to Boulder in a couple of weeks. And I've been invited back to teach at the California Institute for Human Science. Now, I taught there for 6 years. I was on the faculty there for 6 years. That was back in the 90s, mid to late 90s. I taught 2 courses, 2 40-hour courses, behavioral psychoacoustics and clinical neuroacoustics. How we heal with sound, how we resonate the body with different sound frequencies, and the psychoacoustics was how we affect brain function and states of consciousness. And these courses are recognized by the state of California for PhD credits for psychotherapy and human science and a couple of others. And in the course of all that, and then we split off, and and they went their way, and now they've invited me back. And the college has made huge growth since the last time I was there. They were still in the process of going through the various stages of accreditation as a 100% bona fide college. At the time that I was there, it was about halfway through. So they were recognized by other colleges like themselves, but not for major universities or colleges as far as trading credits. But they've finally gone through the final process, and they are now a fully accredited college university where their credits are college credits for any college and any place in the world. So now me teaching this course in behavioral psychoacoustics, 30-hour course, is 100% PhD credits for any college, any place in the world. So that's significant. It's amazing. This is the textbook that I made for that class way back in the 90s. It's a thick textbook, the Behavioral Psychoacoustics course, and I resurrected it. I didn't even really have to make any changes. I mean, this was sort of so far ahead of a time that even after 20 years, it's still ahead of its time. So I didn't really even have to add anything. It's got a lot. There's a lot in here. Anyway, so now that I've resurrected this and I have redone it and, repackaged it, and it's now in use in the school. I do have it. If you want one, digital version is $35, and the print version, which is expensive to make, is $65. So put it in the comments if you want one. All right, so we're talking about reaching. For me, this was a reach. This podcast was me reaching out to the world. It became apparent to me, last year, April, is when I started this. March is when the world closed down because of the coronavirus. The pandemic closed the United States down, closed borders, closed countries all closed down. Everybody started having to wear a mask, and businesses were dying because customers weren't there, and everybody was up and freaking out, and people were dying, and everybody's afraid of getting sick. Stress levels are going through the roof, and as a physician and an expert in stress, that's what I do, advanced methods of stress reduction. I felt it was my calling to, I'm a public figure, officially, so I felt like I needed to step forward. It was a call to action that I have many solutions to stress. That's what I do for a living. I'm an expert, a worldwide expert in stress. So I thought, it's time. I have to reinvent myself. I have to reinvent my workshops online now instead of in person. I had to close my practice for 5 months because the patients I see are the very difficult patients. They've been every place, and now I'm the witch doctor at the end of the trail. They're most at risk, so I had to tell them to stay home. And decided to do these live streams. And I wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't for my son, Shay. I mean, he's the one who knows how to do all this stuff. This broadcast is broadcast through a high-end a video system called OBS Studios with a professional mic that is hanging from a suspended arm and a whole business up here with special lighting all around. And simulcast through YouTube and my own YouTube channel, which he helped to set up, and Facebook. So this is not a small thing for me to be here right now with a pretty decent feed and good sound. It's all done professionally. And it was for me reaching out to the world. And I said this before, that there was a calling that needed to be satisfied. I needed to step forward and do something. I felt I had an answer, and I couldn't be silent anymore. And perhaps that's just the phases that we all go through. I mean, for me, my life has gone through a series of phases every time I reach the big zero at the end of a number. You know, when I was 20. Big things happen. When I was 30, big things happen. When I was 40, big things happen. When I was 50, big things. 60, 70. I'm 73. So this is my period in my 70s as an older man, which blows my mind to even say it, because I'm not an older man on the inside. I'm still me. With a lot of experiences that I've had, a lot of getting beat up by life and learning a lot of tough lessons that have hopefully made me a little wiser, or maybe just not so stupid. But the act of reaching out for me was a big one. It was another significant shift in my consciousness to reach out and do something, and not just talk, but a practical application of doing something that can make a change. And the idea was to have a broadcast every week and talk about how we can reduce stress, and give a free soundtrack every week that is a stress reduction soundtrack through brain entrainment, to keep people going and give people a place to center and come back to get your perspective back. Whatever is happening in the outside world, whatever maelstrom or hurricane or conditions are going on and experiences in the world, there is an oasis center of stillness in the inside of me, a place where I can always go that is still and quiet and stress-free. And meditation has usually been the answer for that. Meditation in all forms by different cultures. Most of those meditation practices require you to be sitting and closing your eyes. Some do not. Meditation in action, karma yoga, every minute Zen, Gurdjieff's working on yourself. Here, now, this is my meditation. And that's what I'm saying to you right now. I mean, right now, this second, can be a practical application of waking up to me, being alive right here, right now. Talking to you, listening to me, whatever. But reaching into myself for that special place is what this is all about. What we're talking about here is, how do I find that place? How do I get to the oasis center in myself, no matter what is going on in the outside world, to get my perspective back, that the purpose of being alive is not to be alive in this particular body for the rest of eternity. It's life itself does not die. Consciousness is here forever. but the forms that it occupies come and go. So, when we talk about this is what comes to mind. Whenever this is the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about reaching. Of course, this Adam reaching for God, or God reaching for Adam. Adam's hand seems to be a little lackadaisical. God's doing the power move here. And Adam's kind of saying, well, okay, maybe. I'm talking about this being my finger, this being my hand, this being my intention right here. Something powerful and on purpose. And this is the universe. So this actually puts forth the way it normally works in most people's lives. The universe is an active force, and I'm a passive force. And therefore, I'm like a cork floating around in the ocean, and the ocean waves are knocking me all over the place with experiences, and I am responding to those experiences the best I can. That's the normal set of things. But if we reverse this, and I become the active force, and I begin to reach out into the universe with a purpose, with an aim, with a destination, with something I want to achieve, I become the active force, and the universe becomes the passive force here. And now I direct what's happening. The universe begins to respond to me instead of the other way around. And that's a recurring theme that I have discussed here over and over again, that for me to become the active force, the universe automatically becomes the passive force. But for me to become the active force, it has to come from the right center. So most people, when they in life, when you get this idea, the bright idea, and you become the active force, it's coming from here, which has no power. This is this is the create E. This is the create or in here. Big mind, quantum mind, mind before a thought, mind before an instant, before time, in the present moment, simultaneous with what's happening. That is the real me, the real I, with a capital I. That's where this comes from. And once that idea, the visualization of what I'm reaching for, gets solidified here and clothes itself and touches my emotions, so there's an emotional pressure of reaching out for something. I get clearly defined. Why am I here? What do I want? What am I reaching for in the universe that I want the universe to deliver as an experience for me in life, in my world? And then realize when I touch this part deep enough, I touch everyone. You and me and everyone and all living beings come from that same matrix where it's all joined together in one spot with many different tentacles coming out, that each one of those is a person or a thing or a living being or a you or a me or whatever, all in a collective unconscious network. That if you can get deep enough down here under the hood, you can touch that. That means all of us touch together in a huge symbiotic whole. And if we align our consciousnesses together and touch that emotional state that is always reaching out for a perfect world, and instead of the imperfect one that we've got, then we can put a group power together to put a lot of pressure on the universe to deliver for us. And we see that in the math of quantum physics. We see it straight out of the laboratory, which seems to be quantum physics discovers the ancient Veda texts in Sanskrit, which talk about exactly the same thing, that you can change the next moment from now if you can synchronize up with the present moment in the quantum field. Then you can alter the outcome of the next moment. You can change it. You can make it change. That's what we're up to here. That's why the mind link. That's why the headphones. Listening to the same soundtrack with entrainment to everybody's brainwaves to precisely and exactly the same spot, so we can align ourselves with a level of precision that has never been possible in human history before. Now we've got the tech to do it. We just need the will to reach a place in ourselves where we have the willpower to create a better place for our children and for us. The battle of World War III is under the hood. It's the great forces of light and darkness are now polarizing out. We can see it all around us. It's polarizing out to the two massive light and dark groups of we're in this together, or I've got mine, screw you. The universe is either believed to be a hostile place where I have to fight tooth and claw for my little spot and then defend it, and on the other hand, it's a beneficent place whose sole duty, the universe's duty, is to support me when I make the right decision for the betterment of my soul. And the ultimate betterment of my soul is the betterment of all souls, that we're in this together, and that we're a family of living beings. And life is better when we're in it together and help one another, that no one gets left behind, that your conscience must be active in life, not just consciousness. Consciousness is the king. Conscience is the queen. And my body is the population. The population of the workers who do their job in order for all of us to be alive. So everybody is on an equal footing. We're just all doing our specific jobs that we do best. And then it becomes a harmonious whole. And that is not what the world looks like right now. It's not a symbiotic relationship of human beings, our species, with the rest of the world. Every other species in the world is part of a symbiotic relationship with each other, obeying the same rules of nature and the universe, except for humanity. We've stepped off that path and think we know better. Our hubris and our arrogance is destroying us. It's destroying the planet's ability to support life in general. That means that when we go down, we take everybody else with us. That is stupid. And we have the power to change it. But only if we come together. And we have to come together in a certain way. It has to be under the hood. And that's not easy to do, but now we have the tech to make it happen. So that's what these broadcasts are about, to flesh that out, to shift consciousness in a way that it can accept that idea, where one force always is active and the other becomes passive. So that's what we're about trying to accomplish. What we really want is to touch each other and for everyone to be active and no one to be passive. That these mind link soundtracks with brain entrainment make all of us an active force coming together at a collective unconscious level, where all of us are being drawn to touch each other with the same strength, that we're all equals here, that we all have an equal puzzle piece of the big puzzle box that's the universe. All of us have our piece. No one is better or bigger than anyone else. We're all just doing our job. If we fall into accepting the job that the universe has created us for, and we walk the path for the betterment of our soul, we become this active force. And having a number of people who understand that concept all together at the same time, who all realize that we're equals here, we're symbiotes here, then we can come confidently into touch with each other where no one is better than anyone else, that we're all a symbiote. We require each other for the perfect world. This place, this magical zone that we create by reaching out to each other and allowing ourselves to be touched and to touch back as equals, creates a vortex in the core of reality and arrives us in a timeless place at the center of the quantum field where all possibilities spin from. And our expectation with an emotional element involved picks which outcome that's going to be, that spins from the eternal present moment that's always there to dip into. The question is, what do you want? So here we go again. And that's what we're here to continually hammer on, to refine our idea of what world do we want if we could touch each other and enter into this space where we could change the quantum field. What would that look like? What is it we're reaching for? It's this incredible network of conscious motes that fill the whole universe. And it's reflected in a miniature in the neurons in our brain. So in one sense, we're all conscious neurons in a universal field where we're making new connections. IQ is more connections between brain cells, not more brain cells. Like Einstein's brain was 35% denser and heavier than normal brains. It was connections between brain cells, not more brain cells. So it's an array that we're creating. And so by connecting ourselves together with these mind links, we're creating a neural network in the macro world. And that's neural network is reflected on the inside in our own brains. That this sort of, quantum reality generator deep on the inside, where I've talked about the default mode network, where the default mode function of the brain, 95% of all the function of the brain is this mind wandering, this, what's it doing down there? I think what it's doing down there, that's the quantum computer that is in the present moment, that's creating the next moment from now. And we're trying to touch into that zone and gain control to change our perception of what reality gets generated. And we see that reflected in brain waves. The brainwave activity of these neurons connected together, they're firing electrical pulses. Those electrical pulses are being read by an EEG machine on the surface of the skull, and these waves of depolarization are happening at different speeds of depolarization waves across the cortex, and the speeds have to do with consciousness: beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma, epsilon, default mode. All of those are different speeds of firings of brain activity. And what I said, in a previous episode is now the newest research that comes through is it turns out that all the electrical activity of the neurons is a side effect of sound waves moving down the axons. It's not electricity that's causing brain waves. It's mechanical energy waves moving down the axons that's squeezing the membranes around the insulation layer around the outside of those nerves. It's squeezing it with a pressure wave, a sound pressure wave, that's causing a piezoelectric effect that's generating electrical pulses at the leading edge of that squeeze. So really the electrical activity we're measuring is an after effect of the sound wave moving down the axon. That's totally crazy. And the question is, where do brainwaves originate from? Where do they come from? And from a physiological standpoint, it comes from an area in the center of the brain. There's two areas on either side that is where the impulse comes from that starts that sound wave that eventually causes the piezoelectric effect that generates electrical pulses in the neurons and creates brain waves and states of consciousness. In the center of the brain is where that begins, right here. And down underneath it, right in this zone, is the hypothalamus that we've spent a lot of time talking about, the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system. Down below that is the pituitary gland. Back over here is the pineal gland. And this is right above the hypothalamus, and it's called the thalamus. A greatly underappreciated zone of the brain. And there's two thalamus organs here, one on either side, one on the right, one on the left. And each one of them, when you pick it apart, is made of little organelles. This looks a lot like what we were talking about with the hypothalamus, which is underneath it right here. There's the hypothalamus. There's the hypothalamus right there. This is the thalamus, hypothalamus. Here's the pituitary. Here's the thalamus picked apart into its little organelles of control. It's the master switchboard. All the sensory information coming up the spinal cord from every part of the body is routing itself through the upper brainstem area. All of that information goes into the thalamus. The thalamus is like Grand Central Station, and it directs out into the cortex where that information is going to go to this appropriate place in the cortex that is designed to process that type of information, make sense of it, route it over to the motor cortex where it can send signals back down into the body and make things happen there. It's the master switchboard of sensory information coming into the areas of the cortex and from the cortex back down through the thalamus out into the body. Master switchboard. So here's the spinal cord is down at the bottom. This is the cerebellum. There's two lobes of the cerebellum. This one has been removed on this side, and this one's been cut in half to reveal the spinal cord, brainstem, pons, medulla, and up here to the right and left thalamus. And the thalamus and the hypothalamus are hardwired together. Here's the thalamus. Here's the hypothalamus. Down here is the pituitary gland. Up here is the pineal gland, all surrounded by cerebral spinal fluid. But we've discussed in great detail the hypothalamus and the control of circadian rhythms, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's why brain entrainment works. We're commandeering the body clocks system in the brain. So we're timing the brain waves with an external sound pulse that's pulsing at a brainwave speed. That's brain entrainment. That's what we're doing with the soundtrack on these broadcasts. And so remember, here's the hypothalamus, which it governs homeostasis, sympathetic, parasympathetic. That's here. Here's the thalamus. There's two of them, one on either side. Amygdala and hippocampus formations wrap around the thalamus and the hypothalamus. They wrap right around it and is hardwired all together into the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is hardwired into the emotions. So when we talk about trying to get into a place in ourselves where it's before a thought and it's in this special place of this zone in a quantum field, and emotions are part of that, a sense of awe. All of this is actually reflected in physicality by master control center and hypothalamus, master switchboard that generates brain waves, and the emotional body network all hardwired together. So we need to have those all experienced at the same time. We need consciousness and conscience, something emotional, all networked together at the same time as a moment. So when we see the thalamus gland sending signals out to various areas of the cortex. And each one of these is a specific type of information from the body, specifically sent out through nerve networks from the thalamus on either side. Here's the thalamus. It's color-coded so we can tell which areas of the thalamus direct the information to which areas of the cortex, right? This area here goes there, this brown goes there, this one goes there. They've all got fancy schmancy names. Lateral geniculate nucleus and on. But when we talk about, reaching, I remember in school when we were discussing the unimaginable level of things that have to go on in order to reach out and grab a cup and bring that cup to your mouth and drink it. That is a constellation of unimaginable complexity. To do something as simple as that, it's unimaginable. The fact that you have to have, your visual center is connecting into networks in the brain, and the frontal lobe is deciding it wants to grab this cup. And so you initiate a reach command that goes into the thalamus. The thalamus directs it down into the spinal cord, finds the appropriate level of the spinal cord where the nerve roots come out that control the muscles of your arm, right? Sends those directions to your arm and your hand. Motor neurons from the motor cortex up here. This sensory cortex is back here. Motor cortex is the blue one. So the motor cortex is sending signals back down into the arm and hand from the appropriate spinal cord level. And then sensory receptors of my fingers tell my brain through sensory information coming up through the spinal cord level, up through the brainstem, into the thalamus, out to the appropriate area of the cortex, the sensory cortex, that my fingers have touched the cup. Mechanoreceptors in my joints and my muscles are telling my body that my fingers are bending and touching and inserting themselves into the handle. All that feedback is coming out through the thalamus into this zone. And then the motor cortex is coming down and saying, okay, we've grabbed the cup, this is fine, now we can start to bring it to our mouths. Right? Basal ganglia judge the grasp forces, that's the mechanoreceptors. The cerebellum back here is smoothing the antagonist muscle pairs so that they smoothly contract and the other ones relax at the same time appropriately. If they don't, we have Parkinson's disease. All of these activities have to happen, and then you have to have stereo vision, three-dimensional sense, so that you can aim this cup towards your mouth and not hit your forehead instead. So just the fact that the hand has to go out in stereo vision to locate that cup and actually hit the cup and not miss it by a foot or two or an inch or two, actually hit it and then grab it with proprioception fibers sending signals back and then bring that up. I've talked about this before, where every minute Zen, chop wood, carry water. The most sacred act of meditation can be me washing the dishes and me reaching for a cup in the soapy water and washing it. From a standpoint of anatomy and physiology, standing there, being able to stand and not fall down is one thing. There's 100,000 things going on every second just to keep you upright so you don't fall over, to keep you balanced upright. While all that's going on, you're identifying the cup you want to watch and you're reaching out for it with all the mechanisms going on I'm just talking about. And now you're having two hands involved because one's got a sponge and one's got this, and you're doing this activity. And all the micro motions of that activity are this volley of information going on back and forth, which is stupendously mind-blowing. It's just, when you study it, it's like, it seems impossible that any biocomputer could ever make enough calculations to make just one tiny little element of the constellation of things going on work. But we're there, we're standing, we're balancing, we're washing, and we're thinking about something else, and we're listening to music on the radio. It's stupendously mind-blowing. It's no wonder the ancients thought it was all magic. It is magic. It's like the level of unbelievable calculation power of the brain definitely shows us that the brain is not what we think it is. That really is, there's a level of quantum computing going on there where all possible outcomes are being calculated simultaneously. The brain is so much bigger than the biggest activity you can think of to try to accomplish. It's bigger than that. It's universal mind. It's networked mind into a collective unconscious level that is so far beyond what we think is going on that when you touch the edge of that, when you start to grok the big picture of just how stupendous it is to take your next breath and have it actually do all the processes of exchange of oxygen and CO2 at a massive lung exchange level, oxygenate the blood, and have that synchronized with whatever's going on in my body with organs and glands and muscle contractions to reach into the blood to grab a handful of oxygen and exchange it with CO2, have it synced up that actually there's oxygen there when I reach for it, because my heart and my respiration are exchanging in a synchronized manner with what my body is asking for. It's like that's going on while I'm standing up washing a dish. Neurochemical hormones. And I mean, it's just, when you start to touch just the edge of it with stretching your mind as much as you can to grasp a little bit of the unimaginable magnitude of what goes on just to take your next breath, is awe-inspiring. That in itself is enough to make a person have a moment of enlightenment, because your brain can't wrap around it all. It's too big. It's too gigantic. And it's just a small, little, microscopic piece of what's actually going on, because I'm networked into the whole universe. I'm a child of reality. I'm a child of the universe. I'm not just some guy with a name with a job. It's stupendously, gigantically, magnificently cosmic, huge, beyond what your body or your mind or your heart can even encompass as an experience. Grabbing a cup and taking a drink is unimaginable, just beyond belief, sacred. So now we begin to understand what the sacredness of the tea ceremony is all about. Making tea. You know, I've been to those tea houses in Taiwan on a mountain. Drive and drive and drive for a couple of hours up to the top of the mountains, which is essentially a rainforest. It's a jungle. It's like you're out in the middle of like massive jungle zone where little towns, little houses have been carved out of the jungle, and little houses are up there, and there's a little tea house on the top of a hill, and you can see the tea fields have been carved out of the jungle, out of the rainforest, and all the tea fields are down there. That's where your tea is coming from. They picked it today. And the tea is brewed in a special thing, and there's a whole ceremony of how you pour it out and throw that away because it's too bitter. You pour it again, and there's this thing that happens, and it's a ceremony, and that cup is all very specially placed before you, and it's mindful tea ceremony. The purpose of the tea ceremony is to be here and be here now. It's chop wood, carry water, make tea, pick tea, brew tea, drink tea, wash the cup. It's profound. Reaching for the cup, drinking the cup, reaching for me to be as aware as possible. Here, now. Me, the cup, the fragrance, the taste. It's an explosion of experience in the simplest possible thing you can imagine. Taking your next breath. Simplest possible thing is unimaginably complex. Yeah. And that was pretty much my experience going to chiropractic school, learning all of the details, the medical level of details of anatomy and physiology and physics and chemistry. And it just was blowing my mind open as a student of esoteric science and meditation and awareness and practices that I had been involved in for years. To go here to school and learn that level was a remarkable experience for me. It was an enlightenment experience for me. Where we reach out for each other and give each other a helping hand. That is the soul of true awakening, where consciousness and conscience come together, where my mind and my heart reach out to each other, where I can reach out to you, because, the most difficult thing for anybody is to accept help, is to be in a position where I'm needy, where I need help, and someone reaches out to help me. And when that exchange is always flipping itself back and forth, where I reach out to help you because I know at some point I will need help and someone will be there for me. That is the sort of world that I want, where we're all brothers and sisters with each other, and the question of if you need help, I will be there for you, is not even a question. It's a given. That there will never be the idea that I have mine, screw you. That we're all in this for ourselves. We're all in this alone. And why should I help you? I've got my own problems. That is not the world I want. And that's the world we've got. That's where we're at. The forces that control the world, that's where they're coming from. And we can change it. And the force of the opposite of that, the force of us in this together, is rising, and has been rising, and it's getting bigger. And along with that comes our love of other creatures and our love of the planet, our simple things of clean water and clean air and helping one another. And that is make love, not war. All of those things is the profound levels of what has to change. And the only way that that's going to change at this point is under the hood here. In the quantum field, World War III is under the hood now. It's the grand battle of all battles. It's the grand battle that is the eternal struggle of yin-yang, the eternal struggle of light versus dark, where we're in this together. And we will accept that helping hand with no guilt and with no reservation, because it will always come around the other way, sooner or later, where we open ourselves up to each other, to the universe, to life, that we let all of the barriers drop and open our heart to the biggest idea we can encompass of what we want the world to be. Knowing that it will fall short, and that's good, that's okay. I open myself to the biggest thing that I can imagine of good for the world to be. That's what we need to center ourselves on when we do this mind link today. Just to open your heart and your mind to the biggest idea that you can get to about what kind of ecstatic, beautiful, wonderful world we would like to have, and that we could create in the next moment from a quantum field. This field of energy that's pure, that's a pure potential to be anything that you can imagine. That's the quantum field. It's Schrodinger's cat, living dead cat. It's a potential for the universe to be anything that you ask it to be. But you have to know what that is. You have to find that place in yourself, the innocent place, the place that's pure. And you have to look that place in the eye. The little infant that you were in the womb is the same person that you are now. That was just you without all the experiences that you have now. But if you dig deep enough, that little tiny baby part of you is still there. The raw part of you that makes you who you truly are is still there. And you've graduated through a whole series of experiences and the hard knocks of the world to get your perspective back. A pure, huge perspective about what it's all about. And go for the gold. You know, we're all, like I said before once, gold medal winners. You represent the sperm that hit the egg out of 50 million sperm. You're the one who got there. You're the one who won the gold. The world is populated by gold medal winners, all of us. We already know what it takes to pull it from your toenails and to stretch yourself as big as you can possibly stretch to reach for the gold ring and gain it and win it. We've all done that. We know what that feels like. And now it's time to do that consciously in this multicellular form. It's time for us to do that again and help each other to all of us simultaneously win the gold in a new format. We do it with sound waves and headphones. And to reach the source of all things. I devoted a whole episode to the 10 steps, the 10 Zen steps to enlightenment. This was the 9th step, at the source, arriving at the source of all things. And the 10th step is in the world. After all the stages of enlightenment where you reach the source of all things, you step out from that into the world, and everyone you see becomes enlightened. Everything you do is a moment of enlightenment, a shining glory of reality, moment after moment after moment. And so we can gain our cosmic perspective of things, the biggest perspective you can think of before a thought in the present moment. Is where we're going. That's what this is all about today. So let's have headphones on. It's like ringing the big bell and dissolving in the vibration back to its real source, reaching the beginning of all things, which is a new beginning all the time. So here we go. Close your eyes, and here we're off. Here's where you can get that soundtrack. That soundtrack was special of all the ones I've done. I took the NASA space sounds that I had with various planets from Voyager 1 and 2, and I did a special digital compression of those space sounds of, say, Jupiter, and compressed it to the point where it sounded like an instrument sound. And I did that with all the planets and the moons and the rings, and created a whole set of instrument sounds that are unique, that came from compressing the planet sounds. And all the instrument sounds that you hear on this recording are compressed space sounds. And in the background are the space sounds that they were compressed from. So there's the space sounds in the background, and on top is the melodies, and the instruments of those melodies are the space sounds you're hearing compressed to make an instrument sound. That's an album I produced called Space Sounds Music. That's the one that you have a discount on if you want to purchase it. But bear that in mind when you listen to that this week. This next time we'll be back to Sunday. My workshop will be over on Saturday. I have another, 3 interviews and major things happening, plus a workshop on Saturday. So Sunday will be another end of a long string of compressed things. It's a good thing. I mean, I'm the one who asked for this. I'm the one who reached out for this, and so the universe is giving it to me, so I can't complain. Thank you all for being here. Love, joy, and peace, and healthy happiness to you all. Until I see you